Colleague Molly Gambhir is, of course, joining us from the newsroom. Molly, this is huge. This was unexpected. The Pakistanis have now agreed to a ceasefire. We also just saw the tweet that was put out by the Indian Foreign Minister, where he said the issue of terror is what is at the heart of all of this. India's actions, Operation Sindoor, and subsequently were all to ensure that Pakistan does not play with its usual playbook of terror. Has Pakistan learned its lesson?
Right, Salil, let's just contextualize for our viewers the developments that have been trickling in over the last half hour or so. Very significant development, breakthrough. Remember, it all started with US President Donald Trump putting out that tweet, putting out that post, in fact, talking about the kind of negotiations that took place all through the night between India and Pakistan. And now we have the confirmation coming in from the Indian side about that ceasefire as well. But it's also important to remind our viewers about the statement that was given out by India just before we saw that statement from the Foreign Secretary of India categorically saying that any future act of terror will be taken as an act of war. So that again was a strong message given out by India before we saw the statement coming in from the Indian Foreign Secretary talking about how the two sides have agreed to stop firing and the ceasefire that has been announced between India and Pakistan. This of course comes right at a point where we were seeing Pakistan continuing with its escalatory moves, and India had said earlier on as well and maintained its stance that it was not interested in an escalation. Let's also lay out for our viewers that the fact that the Pahalgam terror attack resulted in India's strong response and retaliation, a very measured response to Operation Sindoor, which continued. And now we're seeing a point where it's culminated in the form of this ceasefire after US President Donald Trump declared that there were these talks that took place all through the night.
Absolutely, indeed, Molly. This is huge. This is pretty big because this has come out of the blue. This has come at a time when there was a clear going up the escalatory ladder that we were witnessing between India and Pakistan, and the fact that the two sides have now agreed upon a ceasefire. And just an hour before that, there were reports that came through from Government of India's sources that this of course is crucial, which said that any act of terror will be seen tantamount as an act of war. And now the two sides announcing the ceasefire agreement pretty much almost simultaneously. The Pakistani side did it first, and then there was of course this tweet by the American President Donald Trump. So the American mediation is pretty clear, and now there is this confirmation that's been put out by the Indian side as well. So we have on our screens this tweet by Dr. S. Jaishankar, where he makes it abundantly clear. The issue that India and Pakistan do not agree upon is this use of terror by the Pakistani deep state repeatedly over and over again. This is what Pakistan has been doing for the last several decades. It also has this very fancy term for it, this war by 1,000 cuts, to bleed India by 1,000 cuts and to wear India down. This is not going to happen, and this is not going to be acceptable to the Indian nation, which is why the Indian nation has been retaliating and retaliating hard, which is what we've witnessed over the course of the last few days. The two nations stood effectively on the brink of war, or should we say there was unofficially an unannounced war that the two nations were in fact engaged in. S. Jaishankar saying that India and Pakistan have agreed to a ceasefire. The truce was announced after 4 days of a conflict that was just going up the escalatory ladder. The Pakistani DGMO spoke with the Indian DGMO at about 3:35 p.m. and at 5 p.m. Indian Standard Time. That is when the ceasefire, of course, came into effect. And my colleague Siddhant Sibal is joining us with more updates on this. Siddhant, this is a ceasefire that's come straight out of the blue. Pakistan seems to be talking a completely different tune. What has changed here? What are the behind the scenes negotiations that have taken place? How is it that this ceasefire has been reached in this pretty dramatic manner?
Well, this is something very significant. We know that the situation was very bad. We know how India was able to thwart Pakistani attempts to create crisis. Pakistan indulged in every kind of propaganda. And now India has been able to not only thwart it, but send a clear message India has put a deterrence in terms of the next terror attack. The Indian side has made it clear that next terror attack will be seen as an act of war, and this is something that is a clear message from New Delhi to Pakistan. So all in all, both sides are in touch. DGMO talks were happening, and they will again happen on Monday. So in that DGMO talks, we could see more engagement between the two sides.
Indeed, the DGMO talks will, of course, happen. Do continue to stay on with this, Siddhant. Molly, if I can bring you in here, this is very, very interesting. The American position was pretty ambivalent. Earlier, J.D. Vance had said that this conflict is none of the American business and the Americans will choose to stay out of it. But what we are witnessing, Marco Rubio's tweet makes it abundantly clear that the Americans were talking both to the Pakistanis and to the Indians, and the Americans seem to have succeeded in leaning in and using their leverage to make Pakistan see some sense. What do you make of this American position where America seems to be an active mediator in bringing about this ceasefire?
Right, Saleh, important to also contextualize for our viewers the kind of statements that have been coming in from the United States vis-a-vis the India-Pakistan conflict and the spiraling tensions we saw Marco Rubio earlier talking about and putting out that statement. We knew about the conversations that were taking place, that he was having with the Indian side and with the Pakistani side. But very important to underline the message that had come in earlier from Marco Rubio to Pakistan, where he said that Pakistan must stop the support to cross-border terror, must stop supporting terror. And that was a very categorical statement coming in. So while there were attempts from the US side, from Marco Rubio, to try and de-escalate the tensions, there were conversations taking place on part of the United States with both India and Pakistan. But the message from America was absolutely clear when it comes to terror. And Saleh, the point is that this is something that India has also maintained all throughout. It has zero tolerance on terror. We saw that position being reiterated through government sources as well, where we talked about how India has once again very strongly maintained that it has zero tolerance on terror and any act of terror will be taken as an act of war. So we have to also talk about the fact that the US, in its conversations with Pakistan in the run-up to the announcement of the ceasefire in public domain, had also talked about how Pakistan must stop its support to terror. So, of course, we can go back to the entire period where we've seen the American intervention. We've seen the kind of relationship that the US has had with both with Pakistan as well. But at this point, I think it's important to underline that this is a breakthrough that's come in. We do know that there were those conversations that took place through the night, as Trump pointed out in that post as well. We do know that there were attempts being made all through from the United States side. And now that we have that confirmation of the ceasefire coming in, of course, it's coming at a crucial time, like we just mentioned, at a time when we were looking at both sides. Making it absolutely clear. India, of course, had made it clear that any escalation will be responded to in a befitting manner.
Absolutely, indeed, Molly. That, of course, seems to be the crux of this understanding that India has made it clear that an act of terror perpetrated in India by Pakistan